Good evening, one and all, and welcome to today's broadcast, HR Sound Off Live. My name is Julie Turney, and I am your host. You know me. So today we're going to have a really interesting conversation as we start to talk about the gig economy and gig HR and how this is impacting us as HR professionals. Should HR professionals even be a part of the gig economy in terms of, are there roles for us to work without having to go into the office? Should that be a permanent thing for us in HR? And how do we deal with those nomad employees, those people who never come into the office at all? How do we work with them? How do we integrate them into the organizational ecosystem? Is that even important? So these are the conversations that we are going to be having today. And here to join me for that conversation is Dr. Rochelle Haynes. I really admire Rochelle and all of her hard work that she's trying to achieve with the gig economy and spreading the word about the importance of making nomad life a normal part of our work ecosystem. And hopefully we'll have Jamie Jacobs joining us as well, but she hasn't joined the stream as yet, so we're just waiting patiently for her. But in the meantime, I'm going to bring up Dr. Rochelle Haynes, and we will start our conversation. Rochelle.
Hi, Julie. Nice to be here.
Thank you for joining me. So nice to have you today, joining us out of the sunny UK.
Yeah, it was actually quite sunny today, shockingly.
Well,
it looked like Barbados today.
Well, spring is in the air. Spring is in the air, so it should be looking good. Although I have heard reports that while spring may be in the air, we are still having the challenge of snow in April. Like, that is very confusing to me.
Yeah, probably more in the north. Luckily, I'm down south, so we get the good weather down here.
All right.
Good weather.
I'm so appreciative of you joining me today for this particular conversation. I really appreciate it, especially considering the fact that you just got back from Barbados today.
Serious jet lag. Forgive the baggy eyes and the sleepy eyes. I'm awake.
It's nice to have you. So let's kick off the conversation. I'm going to give you some time to just tell our audience who you are. And then I will come back on and we will start our conversation, and hopefully Jamie joins us.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm Rochelle. I work in the UK. I currently work as a senior lecturer in the UK, as well as I have my own consulting company, which is called Crowd Potential Consulting. And my story, I don't know, it took a lot of twists along the way. I started out as an accounts executive, from an accounts executive in Barbados to a teacher. And from a teacher, I decided to switch that and move into HR. I really love HR because it's very people oriented. And as my career developed, one of the things I was really interested in was how HR can be relevant, how HR can be, especially as I was in academia as well. I want what we're teaching students, the future of the workforce, to be relevant to what's going on out there. So that was what I was really keen to ensure. So one of the things I did a few years ago, I'll start a little before that actually. One of the things I noticed in my teaching a few years back, let's say 5 or so years ago, is that what I was teaching wasn't quite keeping pace with what I was seeing in my consulting practice. So industry was leaps and bounds ahead of what I was seeing in the classrooms of academia. So I was very curious as to how this very rapidly changing context is affecting the way in which people work, the way in which people's expectations of work has changed. So I started this study 2 years ago called The Future of Work, Changing Work Expectations. And what we were interested in is looking at how persons working remotely, working online, how they view work, and whether that was in the same way that traditional 9-to-5 employees viewed work. And where those work expectations were changing, what does that mean for HR? So what we found in our study, which surprisingly, our study was published, our findings and our white paper was published in February 2020. And in that white paper, we said that work expectations are changing. People want more flexibility. They want more freedom. They want more autonomy over their job. And 9 to 5 work is not moving forward, not really the preferred option. People's preferences and people's idea of working is changing. So as a result of that, what we said in our study was that work is changing, but unfortunately, our study also showed that businesses weren't changing along with those changing work expectations. So we said that businesses needed to embrace remote work more. Businesses need to consider persons working online and how they might be included in the workforce, persons working independently. And we published that in February 2020. And as you know, March 2020, the whole globe went under lockdown. So our study became very front and center. We started getting a lot of phone calls. But one of the things we wanted to keep at the forefront was the nature of work and ensuring a good work experience. So I call myself a good work advocate because my consultancy is all about creating better relationships between organizations and persons who work in different ways. So whether you are working as an independent contractor, whether you're a full-time employee, or whether you are just working remotely, even if full-time, our interest is whatever your working context, you should be able to have as good a work experience as a person who is working, let's say, traditionally or 9 to 5. And one of the things that we've seen is that that's not the case. We have this sort of tier or classes of workers where the full-time 9 to 5 employee is usually considered the real employees, the real workforce, whereas somebody who's working remotely or independent or on a project basis for the company, they're seen as casual work. They're not really visible. They're not really seen as the organization's responsibility. So we are on a mission to change that, because more and more with more and more persons choosing to work this way, organizations are losing a lot of key talent by not paying attention to different ways in which people work. But on top of that, these employees or these workers are suffering in terms of their working conditions, in terms of clashes with organizations, unrealistic expectations, and just not enough support. So that's really my mission in terms of a consultant, in terms of a good work advocate, and in terms of an academic. So hopefully, Julie, that gives you a flavor and our audience a flavor.
Definitely. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. I'm now going to bring up Jamie so that she can do the same. And Jamie is going to tell us her origin story and tell us what we can expect from her today.
Hi, thank you so much, Julie. And Rochelle, I loved hearing your story. It's very motivating to hear that there's others who have similar outlooks. So my name is Jamie Jacobs, and I run a company called Gig Talent. And my origin story, I started in corporate America. I worked for big public companies, and I worked for fast-growing startups in HR, and I loved it. And I looked back at my career, and the theme was around change and transformation. And so I eventually knew I wanted to do my own thing, and I was going out on my own. But as I made that decision, there's a lot of fear that goes along with kind of leaving the construct of a big company, as well as, some real things about being part of a team and things like that. To Rochelle's point, more and more people are choosing the way that they want to work and entering what we call the gig economy. And I just believe that life is short and people should do what makes them happy. So if they decide to work in a company, it should be a company that has a really strong culture where they feel that there's values alignment between our personal and the corporate company values. Because if there's not alignment, it's not going to feel good, at least. And you probably aren't going to do your best work. But for those who want to enter the gig economy, there's so many options in how we work today. The statistic I've seen is that more than 50% of the workforce is actually going to be involved in the gig economy in some way by 2025 or 2030. And 45% of workers today they might have a side gig or they're involved in some way. So we see those trends going. And to the point that was made earlier, that segmentation of the workforce and within companies is something that I think is starting to change. We're seeing really proactive companies looking at their talent strategies in a different way, and they're looking at that as in an integrated fashion. And elastic talent, or the gig economy, whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of names for it these days, is actually being proactively integrated into talent strategies today. So what you see happening is worker preferences changing, and the way that people want to work is changing, and more people are choosing to enter the gig economy and kind of work on their own terms, which can mean, and it can be for lots of reasons. It can be for the flexibility. It can be because they want to specialize in specific work that they're really, really good at, and they want to have impact across multiple companies, not just one. There's lots of reasons why people enter gig economy, but for companies, it allows this, you kind of on-demand talent. So what's different today than maybe previously is that these folks that are in the gig economy, I'll include myself, they're highly skilled, right? So they bring many years of experience, and they may be able to help companies deliver either faster, smarter, a unique skill set, and augment teams in a way that doesn't necessarily require a full-time headcount, and maybe the role isn't full-time, but will allow them to meet those business goals in a really smart way. So what's exciting to me is seeing this convergence of the worker preferences and the way that people are looking at freedom and their opportunities and options around work, and the role that work plays in their lives, and how they can lean into their special skill sets and what they love to do and are really good at, their passions. And still do really good work and have an impact on the organizations that they partner with. And companies are finding new ways to engage with that in a way that allows them to find solutions for the work that needs to get done. So for me, I think that as I learned that life is short, and there was one specific moment. It was in 2009. I was sitting in a big corner office at a Fortune 50 company. I worked my way up. I was a single mom and loved my career and all these things, but I just felt disconnected to it. And I was really looking to kind of understand why that was. I loved my job. I loved my company. I loved my family and friends, all of those things, but it just didn't feel totally aligned for me. And I started to just be on a personal journey, understanding the role that fear kind of played in my life. I was playing it a little bit safe. And as I started to kind of expand that, it's what led me to gig talent and wanting to help others on their journey. While I don't believe that, it has to be that path for everyone, whether it's, I just think life is short. So if you're going to be in a company, work for a company where you feel strong alignment, passionate about the work, and fully aligned with values, or work for yourself and create that on your own. That's kind of what I'm all about.
Oh, I was on Zoom.
Okay, good. I thought it was me.
It's that typical Zoom syndrome, right? So thank you so much, ladies, for joining me today for this conversation. I really appreciate it. And kind of given us a definition for what it looks like when we talk about the gig economy, when we talk about gig work. You both kind of spelled that out, what that means. And so I don't need to ask this question again, but just kind of glossing over it. What I will say is, as we talk about what the gig economy is and the impact that it has on the future of work, we have to look at, as you rightly said, Jamie, in terms of, can everyone be a part of this thing that we call gig economy? Can everybody be a digital nomad? What does that really look like? So when we think about the kind of roles that can become remote roles, that can be done anywhere, as an HR department, working with leaders in the organization, how do we start to map that conversation out as to what the ecosystem of our organization starts to look like? Rochelle, do you want to go first on that?
Sure. I think in many cases, it's for organizations to be willing to look and review the current roles that they have. A lot of time, organizations say, no, that can't be a gig role, without actually looking at what it takes or how you might be able to facilitate that. So I think it needs to start with some sort of internal audit where we're looking at the roles, we're looking at job descriptions, we're considering what are the barriers to making this role remote. Does this person even want to work remotely? And if they want to, what are some of the things that might help or hinder that? How can we facilitate that? What adjustments might we have to make? And are they beyond our means or necessary? What is going to be the customer experience as a result of taking this role remote? So I think there's several things that need to be considered, but the organization has to be willing to consider them, because sometimes I've seen in cases with a lot of companies where they say, no, we can't do that, or it's just not done, but they actually have never tried, or they haven't been even willing to have the conversation. And when they start to open up to the conversation, they realize, well, that didn't take as much as I thought it would. That wasn't as hard. And furthermore, we're actually getting a better return. Productivity is increasing, our customers are still happy, and so forth. So I think it needs to be a willingness and a sort of mindset shift around actually embracing gig work in the first place.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you there. Mindset is very important. And then also looking at your organization and going, okay, which of these positions make sense, but involving employees in the conversation is huge. I feel like that's really important. So thank you for sharing that with us. Jamie, what do you say?
Yeah, so mindset is huge. And I think that what we're seeing companies do more of now is break the work down into tasks. So, a job description has a bunch of tasks as part of it. And a lot of times we're trying to solve for internal gaps. And sometimes you create a job description of a person that just doesn't exist, right? Yeah. And so if we break it down by tasks, we may be able to solve for some of those needs that are still real needs, but at a task level, either with someone from the gig economy or some other kind of resource. So that is definitely one thing. And then the other thing that I encourage leaders to think about is, so long term, let's just say you need a leader for a function, and it's a new function, and you're going to build something out. The leader who's going to come in and build it might be a different leader who's going to sustain it once you get it up and going. And you can hire, and the person who's going to build it probably won't want to sustain it, right? So maybe you bring someone in on a contract for a year or even a year and a half, or it could be 6 months, whatever your time to market constraints are, but they come in and deliver and then help onboard the person who's going to take it and run with it and continue to build it and sustain. And so there's lots of ways to use to gig workers in different ways based on the kind of longer term goals of the company. And so you have to anticipate what's coming and what you're trying to achieve from a business perspective, and think it's just about thinking differently, that mindset that you already talked about around talent and how we can access it in different ways that are going to serve our business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely got to agree with that as well. And I think that this is a great conversation, especially now as we think about I hate this word. I can't even believe I'm going to say it. New normal. That new normal that we're talking about in terms of what work looks like. We've seen companies like Twitter go fully hybrid. We've seen it happen with Google. We've seen it happen with a lot of those tech companies, but it's also happening in other organizations as well. I'm seeing it happening in banks, but then you still have the bigger banks like Wells Fargo and Barclays and all of these banks that just want people back in the office. So I got to ask this question, what types of jobs then are gig workers best suited for? Because as HR professionals go forward, we always have this constant battle of fighting. We're always fighting for people, whether they see it or not. It's what we're constantly doing in the background, and we have to go forward and fight for a lot of these roles to become remote roles, gig roles. what types of jobs then are gig workers best suited for as we go forward for that fight? Like, what kind of data, what kind of information can we bring to the table to help our stakeholders, like the crazies in the banking space who still want to see people in a seat, really understand that return on investment for making some of these critical roles remote?
So I'll just jump in. I'm laughing.
Sorry, yes, go ahead.
My best friend is in finance, and so we actually have this conversation because her company is doing the same thing. Like, they want people back in the office, and she's, their sister companies, like kind of all their competition, are doing the same thing. So we're having that discussion, and the conversation that I have about it is, I think, is it going to change over time? So right now they may be able to kind of demand that, right? People come back, and people may come back, but will they stay, right? Will they stay, or will they migrate over time to organizations where there's greater flexibility? And she would say, well, what we saw, I think it was in the early 90s, was that banks just decided to pay people more. And that kept a certain, population kind of working the same way. And I think it remains to be seen this time around, because I think the change is so dramatic across our workforce and the way that people are working, and what we've learned over the last 12 months around, working remote. And we all did it. I get that, especially in that industry, there's a lot to be learned for people who are new to be in the office and working with some of the more senior folks. And that's part of their kind of career development, their up and out philosophy. And so, I certainly understand that, and there's value in that, but there's probably, just like we're innovating around collaboration and what that means for teams, I think that industry could do it too. So that was kind of I went a little specific on that, but I literally just had that conversation.
Yeah. And I definitely agree with you, because, when you think about it, I've been reading all the reports, especially from an HR perspective. And a lot of what we're seeing is that we already knew we were dealing with a disengaged workforce prior to COVID. We've been dealing with a disengaged workforce for a very long time. That flexibility needed to come 2 years, maybe 5 years ago. So now what people are doing is, now that flexibility is starting to come, a lot of people are transitioning. Number one, if they didn't like how you treated them during COVID, they're definitely not coming back. And they are looking for that flexibility that you're not willing to give them. And money isn't always the answer, because the needs of people are changing. If you look at the generations that are coming into the workforce now, and I always make reference to my 23-year-old son, because what my son knows, he could come home. He could be, comfortable living with mom and dad again. But at the end of the day, what he wants to know is that he belongs to something that's bigger than him. And he wants to know that he's adding value. And if you're not giving him that, the money doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So these generations that are coming through the door now, the generations that we are raising for and preparing for the world of work, have a completely different ethos. And they're not always about the money. They're more about the flexibility. So I take that to your point as part of the conversation that we have with our stakeholders, because we will lose a lot of our key players, our key top performers, if we're not willing to be flexible, and just throwing money at people will no longer be the answer. So I take to your point, Rochelle.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think in many corporate companies with that sort of, we want workers in the office, I think they're still thinking with this sort of limited mindset, where it's about, okay, we need to see and we need to monitor people. Oh, we can't do this for this reason. This is always how it's been done. I find there are more and more jobs that are going remote. There are more and more jobs that people thought that couldn't be done remotely, that we are seeing that can be done remotely. So often when the question is asked, what kind of jobs are best suited for remote work, I think often that range and variety is growing so much that the question might be more, what type of jobs aren't suited in a few years' time? Just because even someone pointed, and I mean, this is old news now, but even surgeries can be done remotely. You have virtual assistants, you have finance. I know a lot of persons have moved their entire accounting departments remote because of the pandemic. So I really hope that businesses start to see and embrace the evidence, because I think the other part of it as well is that they're still seeing the move as temporary. They're seeing this, okay, as a response to COVID, yes. This change was there already. When we did the study, we called it the silent revolution. We called it the invisible workforce. It was there, and this was coming already. So a lot of businesses are still seeing it as, oh, well, we're just doing this temporarily until we can go back to the old way. But no, this was what was coming. COVID accelerated it. And I think there needs to be that acceptance around it.
Definitely. You are so right.
She's so right.
She is. She truly is. And I want to talk a little bit more about your study as well, Rochelle. And I also want to talk a little bit about your book, Jamie, because both of these printed on paper really show us what is possible as we start to consider the world of work. But I just want to clear up something. I'm seeing a comment here. So I'm seeing a comment here that says gig doesn't equal remote. So I think it shouldn't be used interchangeably. You want to share your thoughts on that comment?
I agree. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. I totally agree. And I think, on the prior question around what could be gig work, like not all gig workers want to be remote, right? I mean, it's not so, you may want to be a gig worker and not have a preference about whether it's on site or not. So I think that Yamfit has a good point there. And we're not, I certainly don't want it to be interchangeable. I think that there are two big changes happening around gig work, which is one thing, and then kind of flex, whether it's on-site and off-site work. And I just think that to the point that this was a change that was already coming is for sure. And the way we were working before was not sustainable. So when we talk about sustaining high performance or top performance, these changes needed to happen. And so there's multiple facets of it that are changing. And I'm glad that this person called it out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Rochelle?
Yeah, I totally agree. Sorry. And that's a mistake, even after the study, even after talking about this, that I tend to do. I get very casual in the conversation where I say gig and remote, but they're very much right. And when we did, the article that came out on the study in Forbes in February, and one of the things that we spoke about was exactly that. And I think what the commentator has said here is a point really to bring to the fore. Because when it's assumed that gig workers are all remote workers or all want to be remote workers, and that also influences how the organizations treat them. So in terms of the level of support that's given, or just the understanding around what these different workers need, there are a lot of gig workers that really are after job security, but just maybe on their own terms. There are a lot of gig workers, yes, they may work online, but they still expect to be supported and interacted with the company. And they also, some gig workers aren't always task workers. They may just work for one particular company. So I very much agree in terms of making that distinction. That's very important.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that takes us in our segue into this particular question that we have up next. Because when you think about supporting gig workers specifically, and you talked about it just now, Rochelle, you mentioned about belonging. You're a part of the organization, but you don't physically sit within the organization. And a lot of times, I think there was a study, and I think I read a bit of it in your book, Jamie, where persons showed that they didn't feel like they belonged to the organization because of this particular reason, because you don't sit physically in the organization, you don't get integrated, you're not involved in the day-to-day dynamics of the organization. How can we as HR support integration of gig workers into the organization, into the ecosystem of the organization? How can we make them feel like they belong? And we're not just about cheap labor or labor outside that we don't have, just pooling the talent, but not appreciating the talent. Go ahead.
Sorry, no, Rochelle sounds like an expert on this. I definitely want to hear her perspective.
Yeah, go ahead, Rochelle.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was confused. There are a number of ways. I think Jamie touched on it in her first comment when we started, was that onboarding process of when you first get your gig workers in, how you integrate them into the organization themselves. A lot of times you have this context where often the person that brings the gig worker into the company is not the same person that manages them. Sometimes it's just a matter of procurement. That person comes in, they work on the project, they have very limited interaction with the person, or sometimes there's a lack of understanding around what they have to do. So I've spoken to one gig worker, for example, who said they were contacted by this company to do a project. And while they thought the project was a marketing campaign, a social media marketing campaign, what they actually wanted when they got into the project, what they found out the person wanted was a virtual assistant. So just the complete clash in expectations and the lack of clarity in roles. I think once we get that right up front in terms of designing an onboard process that integrates and incorporates your gig worker, what they need, who they can get in touch with, where they need help and support on a job, that needs to be handled. Whereas some people or some companies, I should say, see gig workers as, okay, well, they're an independent firm. We trust that they know what to do. But often they need information from the company in order to do the job effectively. And so many gig workers have said to us that often the quality of the job that they have delivered was affected by not being able to be in touch with the right person in that organization, persons not getting back to them on time, or not understanding what they actually need. So I think starting with an onboarding process, which orients that person around the organizational expectations, the teams that they're meant to be in contact with, is getting off on the right foot. I'll leave Jamie to elaborate a bit more.
Yes, go ahead.
Really good points. And, for me, as an HR professional, we were taught so much, like, don't treat, your temps or whatever as employees. So you were taught like a fundamental assumption that you had to treat them different. And I question that. I think it's time for us to question a lot of assumptions about the way we always did things. Clearly there are certain things that need to be separate, and we know what those things are. They need to work at their own direction. They need to, have their own tools. There's lots of clarity around that. But companies today are getting more savvy. Many gig workers are incorporating, so they're actually a business entity, which makes it easier for them to do business with. So I think that the onboarding is a really great place to start, and we need to think about it like we would in onboarding anybody into our business. They're going to add to your culture. They're going to add to your teams, and they're going to do better. They're a person just like everyone else who wants to belong, wants to feel part of the team. They're going to do better if they have more information than less. So we really do need to rethink that. And I think it goes back to questioning those assumptions from how we kind of grew up, if you will.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Because we've been trained a certain way. Our mind has been set a certain way, and that mindset needs to shift.
Yeah.
And I think it comes back to what we all talked about before about, looking at the gig economy with a shifting mindset, understanding what it really is, and then understanding the people who want to be a part of that work, and then understanding how we integrate those people into our daily lives, even though we do not see them face to face every single day.
Yeah, it even encourages us to rethink the concept of diversity. When we speak about diversity as a sense of belonging and inclusion and making sure everyone feels welcome in the organization, we often include, in the UK, it's 9 protected characteristics: race, gender, sex, so forth. I've been encouraging a lot of people to think also of the different type of worker as a category, not, of course, experiencing different levels of issues, but we have a lot of persons saying now that they're discriminated against when they work online because they're not treated. They're not given the same level of respect. Their performance reviews are affected. And this is full-time workers as well. You're working in full-time, but as soon as you switch to remote working, a lot of assumptions are made about you. You're not working as hard. You're not really a part of the organization. And that can affect your outcomes as well. So even when we're thinking about diversity and inclusion and a sense of belonging, we need also to consider, with this shift in the way people are working, what are the implications for those individuals?
Yeah.
like reduced visibility, and assumptions around either their work or their capabilities or even their interest, maybe in career development and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I was going to add to that and just think about also the cultural differences. Because once you start to hire people who are gig workers, it doesn't necessarily mean you're hiring people from the same country. And therefore, you want to understand the cultural differences that are going to exist between you and that individual. And if you want to create that sense of belonging, understanding their culture and why they do and say the things that they do and say, and helping them to understand your culture. If your organization is predominantly European or predominantly Caribbean or American, we want to integrate cultural understanding as well. And I think that that's a piece that we miss even from a regular basis being in an organization. I think a lot of times we miss that cultural piece when we talk about diversity and equity and inclusion. But from a gig perspective, I take to all of your points, and I add that one piece, which would be understanding the cultural differences as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So, what would we say as we start to talk now about the benefits of having gig workers? What are some of the main benefits? And I know we've talked about some of them already, but just let's go over them again in this particular context. Like, what are the main benefits for an organization hiring a gig worker? Rochelle.
There's so many benefits. I mean, you need a whole other episode, Julie.
Go.
Yeah, but just to name a few, you have, as Jamie mentioned earlier, you have that on-demand workforce. You're able to scale up and down where needed. You also get to benefit from the best and brightest talent right across the globe, because where you're limiting yourself to workers in a specific geographical locale or workers that primarily can work 9 to 5, you're excluding so much other key talent out there. And as Jamie said before, a lot of gig workers are now highly skilled. Whereas when we were talking gig workers before, when you saw it in the news in the past, it was typically persons working delivery or taxi driver, like lower skill jobs. But a lot of gig workers are now experts. Some are, what one company said to me, this was a consulting job. What they wanted to know was how can they keep on their key talent that was retiring. So a lot of gig workers are persons who have retired but want to continue working. So they have a specific body of expertise that they are taking with them when they leave the company. And if you're able to bring them out as a gig worker, you get to continue benefiting from the level of experience and expertise. So I'll just say as those two benefits and then hand over to Jamie in terms of the on-demand work, but also benefiting from the best and the brightest talent from across the globe.
Yeah, and I love that. I love what you just said. Yes, Jamie.
No, I was reiterating. I mean, I love what you said as well. And I think that there's also something that there was a study, and I don't have the data in front of me, but it was that shows that gig workers are actually more engaged in some ways than other workers. And so, there's something powerful about working with people who are doing the work they want to do. And who, when you get really driven and committed to specific deliverables and things like that, we know everybody does better when you have clear roles and responsibilities and you have goals and objectives. And gig workers often are engaged in ways that have that kind of as a hyper focus, like I'm here to do this, right? So I think the flexibility, the access to very specific skill sets, again, that maybe you don't need as a company, like as a permanent full-time job, but you could 3 months or something, you could really help get something out the door, get to market, or help transform a team or create a vision or whatever the thing is. So very, very exciting, and lots of reasons why companies are starting to integrate it for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that when you think about the benefits of hiring a gig worker, and I'm sure there's a study on this, as I think more about people with that sit in the neurodiversity space, I think as you think about software engineers, data scientists, and a lot of those people are very socially awkward, yet they are brilliant at what they do. And when you, and I think they had a recent study that said 80% of people who suffer with a neurodiversity are unemployed because they don't know how to relate to the world. If you are someone who has autism and you're on the spectrum, if you are like me, someone who suffers with ADHD, or you have Asperger's, right? All of these things, all of these different neurodiverse diseases, well, not diseases, but syndromes, I should say, syndromes. And when you think about it, a lot of times you miss great talent because you don't know how to connect or relate to such a person. But if you encourage these ones to become gig workers, create their own companies, and offer the services working in their own environment where they are most comfortable, they will thrive. They will thrive, and your business will thrive because you're getting the resources that you need right there and then with the expertise that they have. A lot of times, these people are super skilled, but just because of the social awkwardness around it. And I think this is a great opportunity to see that number dwindle from 80% unemployed right down now, where they're going to have these opportunities now to work in these spaces, doing the things they love without having all of that natural day-to-day interaction that would really bother them. If you're not willing to integrate them in such a way where they sit in an office full time, but you're allowing them to work from anywhere, just doing their job and doing what they love anytime, anyhow they want to do it. So I think
that's smart. That's really smart, Julie. I mean, both examples that you guys shared, that you ladies shared. I say guys too much. I'm working on that. But about really expanding the workforce, right? And we know talent. There's a gap in talent, and there's going to be challenges to fill jobs. So if we can expand and go into retirees, go into women, moms returning to the workforce, going into people who may, like you said, otherwise would have found it challenging to be employed. Like, these are ways to expand the workforce in ways that can really not only benefit companies, but all of these people in their own ways as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, even when you think about the number of people, as you think about the world of work and how it is going to expand, because our conversation is about gig HR and the future of work. And when I look at the roles that are going to exist I mean, we say future of work, but like the future is now, like it's happening right now.
Right.
We do need those like work from home HR coordinators, or we do need those drone directors, and we do need more data science people to understand and interpret data to create actionable insights for organizations, so that they can look at how they can become more profitable. And all of these roles that are going to start to exist over the next couple months to years going forward are going to require all of that talent. If we have such a huge gap in technology space, where they're saying that there are over 800,000 jobs globally that still need to be filled from a tech capacity, just imagine like being able to get all of those people from all over the world, filling those positions, closing those gaps, organizations getting what they need, people feeling like they belong, everyone thriving. What happens to the economy? Nothing can stop
Only
me.
one way to go.
All the way up. All the way up.
All the way up.
Yep. It just takes conversations like this to happen, for people to be able to see that and realize that. And as we think about it, even from a banking perspective, this is what irks me when I hear people say, especially in the banking space, like that they need people physically in a seat. When we are moving to technologies like Bitcoin, blockchain, like is a huge thing. Like which bank does that currency sit in? Who owns that?
Yeah.
I am sure, like, if you start to think about that and how we're going to start to exchange money, and we're seeing this happen. And if you look at, I watch BBC a lot, and they have a series that they have on there which talks about everything that's happening in Africa and what people are doing right now, and even how they are creating their own blockchain economy, and that nothing is happening with paper anymore. Everything is digital. What will bankers really have to do, like, going forward? Like, what does the future of banking really look like? And I think that this is something that they really need to consider. Like, if your only hold on people is money, and that no longer becomes a valid currency, then what?
Yeah. I totally agree. And over here, I find in the UK is a really good example of that, because I can count the amount of times I've been into a bank in the last 7 years. I've probably been physically in the bank in 3 times, you know? So I think, or a lot of organizations just need to accept that that shift is coming. And once they're open to that shift, then I think we can go a lot further. I'm sure within this space of times, those banks have operated probably even better than they were doing in the past. So it's, I don't know if it's just human nature to be resistant to change, but I find sometimes persons just fight change for the sake of fighting change.
Jamie, anything you want to add?
And the disruption's coming, right? So I don't know all the answers to solve that problem, but I can tell you disruption's coming. And so hopefully they have some really thoughtful people thinking about it so they can lead the change in their own organizations,
Yeah. Even in the creative industry as well. The creative industry is one that a lot of people said that couldn't go remotely, and I can understand why. But I got a really great example. I was speaking to a person the other day who she's selling digital art, and she's selling digital art online to persons, and they're exchanging cryptocurrency for it. She's not taking regular currency. So she's selling her art, and persons are paying her in Ethereum for the artwork. So, I mean, we're here now, and a lot of companies still think that, oh, that's too far in the future, but this is here and this is now.
Telling you, the future is now. People are getting super creative. Like, just look at Instagram. Look at those social media platforms, but particularly Instagram and TikTok, and what people are doing on those platforms right now. I am surprised at how many places I go. Like, you're scrolling through TikTok, and I see so many people showing other people how to make money without, like, digitally, like how to write blogs and get paid for your blogs. How to create stories and get them sold. Like, a lot of that is happening. How do you create? I saw someone the other day actually did a TikTok video on how to create, it'll come to me, but he was showing you how to create a book and sell it digitally, right? How to create music and, like, white noises, like calm, and different places that you can go to create all of this different white noise, and then where you can go to sell it online. And those videos are all over the place. So when we think about this work and what it's going to become, the possibilities for it are completely endless. Even when you think about this morning, I was talking to someone about podcasting. And I was saying, like, just as you talked about the older generation and that knowledge sharing that we're going to lose, like, could you imagine, like, a group of older people getting together, creating a podcast about, just ways of working, or even talking about all the things that are dying in your culture, and how to help bring them back to life? Like, I in my mind as a Barbadian, I'm sitting down and thinking to myself, but wow, like, if I had 4 grannies, like my granny and 3 of her friends, sitting down talking about things like making cocoa, which bushes to go in and get to help, heal your body from the inside, talking about old times, about walking from Bridgetown to St. Lucie, or St. Lucie to Bridgetown, those kind of things. Like, those things that we are saying are dying would have life again.
Yeah.
And anything is possible to share that knowledge and just bring it to that space.
Absolutely.
I think is super exciting. The possibilities for it are absolutely endless.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
Very inspiring, right? We're going back to fundamentals in so many ways, but with a new twist. And so I love what you mentioned around, like, let's not forget some of those stories, you know, and then think about how can they show up today and maybe take on new life.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yes, definitely. Now I gotta ask this question because it's important. Like, there would have been a time where I'd be like, okay, so where does this fit? Where do we fit as HR professionals? Because I think a lot of times people think that HR really has to sit behind the desk. We really are policing people. Like, no. And this is one of the many misconceptions that I'm always set to demystify about HR. Is it possible for HR professionals to be gig workers? Is it possible, Jamie?
Yes, absolutely. So my company, Gig Talent, that's what we do. We specialize in HR consultants, coaches, and so what we see huge demand. So think about leadership coaches, people who are doing work in the diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity spaces, leadership development and effectiveness, facilitation, strategy work, interim leaders, projects, M&A kind of integration or due diligence, HR transformation, which is kind of everywhere right now. So I mean, yes, absolutely, HR can do it, and you can even get more creative than that. There could be, maybe your onboarding person, because you have onboarding class a couple times a month, and they work a few days a week for you instead of a full-time job, or who knows? I mean, there's so many ways you can do it within companies. But for us, what we've done is we created a certification that really helps kind of set a standard, because for companies, you asked earlier about what HR folks should consider. We definitely need, I don't want to bring somebody into my organization that hasn't had a background check, doesn't meet some of the same kind of standards that we expect of employees. So we help mitigate that we do that for all of our coaches and consultants, and only present certified consultants that have their own entities, have business insurance, have done reference checks, background checks, and those kinds of things. But I think, I just think that, like I said, I'll just go back to life is short. People should do what they want to do. And there's ways to do it in ways you haven't even imagined yet. So if you're an HR person out there and you want something, you want it to look different, or you want to specialize in something and do it across multiple companies, or you want to work remote, or whatever it is that you're looking for in your life, there's a way to make it happen.
Absolutely. 100%, 1000%. So
yeah,
agree.
Yeah.
Rochelle.
Yeah, as you asked the question, Julia, I was thinking it's possible because you're looking at 3 HR right here.
Right.
So for those who asked the question, look on your screen, it's happening. And I think it goes back to the very dynamic nature of the HR profession that's not often highlighted. HR is so much more than admin. I think people still see HR as primarily an admin role. Jamie just mentioned a litany of things there, that just highlights the dynamism of HR. And when you consider those different fields like leadership training, career progression in terms of diversity, management, and so forth, then there's so many avenues that can be taken. And many of them, if not all, can be done remotely. I mean, we've seen a lot of HR companies during the time of COVID managing people remotely. So almost let's say 80% of the world's HR went remote during COVID, and many of them still are. So it's very possible. And you often have a lot of HR persons then branching off and forming their own consultancies and doing that primarily online. So absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I always draw reference to one of my favorite people, Emma Elker from South Africa, and One Circle. That One Circle HR platform that she has created, that HR professionals can go on and they can consult, bid on projects, be seen as thought leaders on that platform as HR professionals. And I'm seeing more and more people do this. Create a space where HR professionals can go and consult online. And I think that this is something that's very huge. So, like, if you're in HR and you're unemployed right now, and you're trying to figure out what your next step is, if you're new to HR and you don't know, like, how to dip your foot in, go check out One Circle HR, go check out Big Talent. And these are the places that you can go and start to build a name for yourself, create projects and get paid right now until you find that's something that you're looking for. Because to your point, Jamie, earlier about, gig work not being for everyone. There are some people that are perfectly fine sitting in an office, interacting with people on a day-to-day basis. And then you have people like me who are introverts, ADHD, and I'm just perfectly fine to sit in my house, work on projects, talk to my daughter, talk to my son, and then come back and do other stuff, and thrive that way, So I think it's understanding if it is for you or not. I cannot believe that the time has gone by so quickly. Like, this is a topic we could talk about so much. Yeah. But I want to take us to final comments and closing remarks. Jamie, do you want to kick us off?
Well, just thank you again for having us. I've really enjoyed speaking with both of you. I would love to do more of it. So I'll say that. I guess my biggest message is, do what you love and love what you do. Life is short. We kind of, we have this one time around right now, and there's so much, just recognize that there's choice. There's choice in how you design your life. There's choice how you integrate work as a component of that. I personally feel better when I'm doing meaningful work, and there's lots of ways that we can do that. So I guess I'll offer myself as a resource if someone, wanted to talk through, something you're going through, or navigating, send me an email or connect on LinkedIn, because I'm happy to, just share my story and what I've learned, and recognize that there's so many new paths, and just because you haven't seen it before doesn't mean it can't be done or doesn't exist.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rochelle.
Yeah, that was Jamie. Just stole my final comment.
Impossible.
Yeah, well done. Prophetic, absolutely prophetic. Yeah, I was gonna say that. Don't knock it until you try it. Don't just say no. Try it first to see if it actually works, because a lot of people aren't doing things out of fear and because they're afraid that it won't work without actually having done the research or without actually trying the thing first. So I think just be more open-minded to trying new things. As we've said, it's a brave new world out there, and there's so much more that's possible. So whereas you might be saying no because you're thinking back to past challenges you faced or what someone has said they faced in the past, actually there's so much opportunity out there, especially in the online world. And especially in this context where so many people are unemployed. If you're unemployed or you're unengaged, you're thinking about switching careers and you feel a bit stuck, go online, investigate what's out there, speak to someone. I'm happy also, similar to Jamie, I'm happy if you want to ever speak. But there's so many there's so many opportunities out there for people. So really take advantage of those opportunities, because if you don't, someone else will.
Definitely. And I know I'm so grateful for both of you joining me today for this conversation. Tell the beautiful people that are watching, that will be watching the replay, where they can find you on social media. I'm going to start with you, Jamie.
So Jamie Jacobs on LinkedIn. There you go. You can see my things. And you mentioned the book, so I'll just hold it up. So maybe
yes.
You can see
yes.
Yes. On Amazon or anywhere books are sold. But we
definitely. And Rochelle.
I'm Dr. Rochelle Haynes on LinkedIn. On Instagram, I'm Rochelle Haynes or Haynes Life. On Twitter as well, Dr. Rochelle Haynes 1. And also I have a podcast called Remotely Speaking Up. So we have an Instagram page. So if you go on Instagram, Remotely Speaking Up.
Nice. Definitely, guys. So if you need to get some support, if you're trying to figure out how to work through this life as we become more digital and we talk about the gig economy, then, please reach out to both of these ladies, Jamie and Dr. Rochelle Haynes, both willing to help you if that's what you need. We are at the end of today's conversation. If you want to join our conversation, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, That's where HR Sound Off lives. You can listen to our podcast, my podcast, on every podcast platform that is possibly out there. Spotify, iTunes, Google, you can find the podcast. It is released every single week. I have a new episode out every single week. We are now at episode 53. And once a month, you will find me right here on YouTube, live and direct, talking to amazing people in the HR space, opening up your community, because my community is your community. So who is up next? Next, we are going to be talking about building intentional work cultures. And I know I've had a lot of these conversations. I think I only have one guy on for the entire year so far. So next month, the month of May, we will be having this conversation with two of my favorite people, Galen Emmanuel and Gethin Nadin. And we are going to be talking about building intentional work cultures with both of these guys. Super, super passionate about building great work cultures. You're going to gain a lot of information and insights just from them. I would say if you are not following Shift Yes on YouTube, you are missing some amazing content from Galen. Not only is he super smart, but he's hilarious. Like, he makes my day every day, all the time. So I would say go check out Shift Yes if you're not sure who Galen is. If you want to learn more about Gethin, same thing, go check out YouTube. They both have great channels and they're both sharing great information. But yeah, that is a wrap for today, my amazing people. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Forward to talking with you both again soon.
Look forward to it. Such a